Well, welcome back, everyone. We continue our investigation into a military gone woke. The quest, of course, is to turn our fighting force into a giant social experiment. The result is a military more divided and then less prepared, as every branch of our military focuses more on racism and so-called tolerance than they do battlefield theory. We are now discovering more about the lengths the Pentagon is going to push this woke nonsense. Why don't you take a look at this? The Navy is quietly rolling out a program called Task Force One Navy, and part of that program forces sailors to pledge to, quote, commit to all lived experiences and intersectional identities. It sounds ridiculous on its face. It even recommends contractors sign this inclusivity pledge. Navy Admiral Michael Gilday is the man who commissioned the task force. Here's a Navy video talking about it.
His goal for the task force: to identify barriers of inequality and improve inclusion and diversity within the Navy, ultimately increasing readiness and warfighting excellence.
Well, a brand new report from a former Navy admiral and retired Marine general casts serious doubt on our fighting forces' readiness. It's no wonder after watching that last video. This new report is explaining that the Navy is simply not focused on war and only focused on, quote, racial diversity. In the report, a recently retired senior enlisted leader states, quote, I guarantee you every unit in the Navy is up to speed on their diversity training. I'm sorry that I can't say the same of their ship handling training. It's all pretty stunning, really. And we would be naive to think this is just happening in the Navy. In fact, we know it's not. This report reveals what nobody in this country wants to hear. Our military is slowly becoming to a point where we're not going to be ready if our enemies come calling. And what those in the military refuse to admit is that, you ready for this? Extremism amongst the ranks may actually be coming from the left. And it's more dangerous than the handful of right-wing extremists allegedly rooted out of the nearly 2 million members of the U.S. military, a handful. In fact, former U.S. Space Force Commander Matthew Lohmeyer warns the military is actually radicalizing members into becoming trained Marxists in the United States military. That's the opposite of what we're being told by the media. Top brass ousted Lohmeyer from the military for blowing the whistle on this divisive critical race theory being taught to our servicemen and women. He is also the author of the book, Irresistible Revolution, Marxism Goal of Conquest and the Unmaking of the American Military. Well, Lieutenant Colonel Lohmeyer is also our next guest. Colonel, it is great to have you on the program.
Grant, thanks for having me.
So, I was doing some research on your book and everything you've been saying. This idea that they're training people in the military to become leftist Marxists is stunning, because that's not what we're getting from the mainstream media, Colonel.
Well, I'll say first up front that these are my own views and not those of the Defense Department. I'm also going to correct what you've said, just to say that I have never said it exactly like you've just said it, although I have been pretty clear, both in a public setting as well as in my book, what I mean by the fact that there is Marxist-rooted trainings taking place in our Defense Department. And so I'll say this up front. For most of your viewers who may or may not already be aware, I was in command of a squadron for the Space Force for the past year, but it was alleged that I was politically partisan because, one, I asserted that the greatness of the American ideal and the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution is worth defending. Two, that Marxist ideology fundamentally undermines our American values. And three, that the diversity, equity, and inclusion industry to which our military service members have begun to be subject is steeped in the academic discipline of critical race theory, which is undeniably rooted in Marxist ideology. None of the three of those assertions, which form the basis of my book and the basis of all of my talking points for the past 2 months, is politically partisan. Those are nonpartisan issues. If you're American and you believe in this country, then you should have an issue with any Marxist-rooted academic discipline that seeks to undermine our history, what we were, are, and should become. And in fact, as you're aware, and your viewers are aware, critical race theory, since it is steeped in Marxism, seeks to fundamentally transform this country and even overthrow it.
What amazes me is that they ousted you because they thought you were being political and partisan when all you were doing was calling out the partisan thinking and thought. And so my apologies if I somehow misquoted you on there, but I did see that you found videos that talk about Black Lives Matter, radical anarchists. I look at them doing videos for the United States military, and then you had screenshots of members of our military talking about hating cops and saying horrible things about cops. That sounds like radicalization to me.
The radicalization which you see proliferated throughout broader American society right now is unfortunately something to which our young service members are also subject on their social media platforms. They've been trained otherwise when they join the military services to be nonpartisan or apolitical. Unfortunately, because of policy, it is easy to not recognize the danger of the social justice activist narratives and movement underway. If it seems that policy supports various viewpoints that in fact are Marxist, then how is it exactly that you begin to divorce yourselves from those ideas and more fully appreciate your obligation to the nation and just simply do your job, which is defend the nation and our allies? And I'll say to your, you made a point how divisive this is. Critical race theory and Marxism were intended to divide. They were not and never were and never will be intended to unite people. And therefore, we will not unite in the military services like we always traditionally have been if we continue to push this as our training agenda.
You know, when I think about members of our military, and I didn't serve, but I think you have a common purpose that unites everybody. That's survival, and that's defense, and that's taking the fight to the enemy. That should unify everybody, not all this other nonsense. Let me ask you real quick, if I can, before I let you go, and if you give a quick answer after this question. Is our national security at risk because of this?
Well, there's been a lot of talk about extremist ideologies in the Defense Department for some months now. Any extremist ideology that is acted upon, certainly, but that is proliferated throughout our country, but more particularly in our military services, is of course a threat to our national security. The oath that military service members take is that they'll defend the Constitution of the United States against all its enemies, foreign and domestic. You have to ask yourself, what is a domestic enemy? If not an ideologically driven narrative that seeks to undermine the very foundations of this country and tries to get people to hate this country. So yeah, it's a fundamental concern for our security.
It is frightening to say the least, but I'm grateful that you're calling it out, and I'm grateful for your service to this country, Lieutenant Colonel. Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Lohmeyer, thank you for coming on the program today.
Thanks, Grant, for having me.
Hey, I'm Rob Finnerty. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please join the conversation in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, too. Hit the bell icon to be alerted to breaking news. And remember, there's a whole lot more on Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news network. Newsmax TV, where real news for real people.